cannibal cop wandering around with a badge. It was unbelievable. But there were two sides to this story.
Yeah, there's depraved language and unconventional thoughts, but there's no evidence.
It just sends a shiver down my spine.
What is the line between fantasy and crime?
So that's the question. That line between fantasy and crime, it's the crux of the Cannibal Cop case, and it's also the subject of a new HBO documentary, as you saw. Former NYPD officer Gilberto Valle was accused of plotting online to kidnap, torture, and then consume women. He was convicted in 2013, but a federal judge overturned the conviction, saying this was just, quote, fantasy role play, end quote. Now, the prosecutor is asking an appeals panel to reinstate the conviction. So here's a question for the table. When do thoughts become criminal? And yes, there's an additional element, Jimmy, which is it wasn't just sitting in his computer. He went to take a little road trip for himself, right?
Yes, he did. He went to Maryland to have lunch with one of the victims he wanted to have for lunch. So, you know, when does fantasy become reality? When does it become criminal? Well, there's no question much of this was fantasy. He sat in front of his computer, but he actually took steps to make it a reality.
But he didn't break
the
a
prosecution. No, but sometimes an overt act in furtherance of a conspiracy doesn't necessarily need to be a crime in and of itself. Now, it seems to me that the panel is siding more with the defense here based on the oral argument. There was one judge that clearly thought that the conviction should be reinstated. But that's the problem. You have these thoughts, and then the question of whether you act on it to make it a reality and how close you come.
Susan, is the line clear?
I think it's clear. The charge here, remember, he wasn't charged with thinking it, intending it, hoping it, wanting it. He was charged with conspiracy. He was charged with agreeing with another person to do it, to commit the crime. And this is another person apparently in the, it's not a chat room, it's like a game room that he allegedly agreed with. And I don't see any difference between this, what happens in these rooms, and TV and movies and novels. Horrific things are put on the big screen, are written in books, and it's not a crime.
Instead of a made-up name, though, Mayo, there was a name of a person that he also chose and solicited an audience with. You can argue, I'm sure as prosecutors do you want us to wait until they actually kill somebody and eats them to prove the point? He's laid out in clear detail what his intentions are and his desires, and he seeks out other people of like mind, and he even sought out the person that was targeted. Didn't commit a crime, but he certainly found her.
I think you have to, otherwise you become Minority Report. You have to wait until something is done. It can't simply be that he had lunch. I mean, again, Stephen King would have been in prison a long time ago, and he hasn't harmed anybody as far as we know.
But wait a minute, if you conspire with somebody online to abuse a child, you have an agreement. Now, conspiracy is an agreement. You don't need a completed crime, okay? And then, in furtherance of that, you target a child, and then one of you agrees to go meet with the child to basically case your target. I just think it's not as clear. Well, that's all I'm saying.
There's the key word is agreement. When you have people in these rooms play acting, and they play act an agreement, is that a real world agreement to commit a crime?
I agree with you on that. In terms of the agreement, if the evidence was insufficient for the agreement, then if there's no agreement, it doesn't matter what he did after. Right. I'm simply saying if you can establish an agreement in that way, the act of going and having lunch, I don't think is just some innocuous non-criminal act.
And maybe it's trouble
with
anything that there are rooms, to use the expression, where like-minded people have this on the brain. Man. All right, I got another question for the table. This one out of California, where a woman is suing her former employer for wrongful termination. But here's where it gets interesting. Mirna Aria says that she was fired for deleting a location tracking app from her company-issued iPhone. Company says it used the app called Zora to help with logistics for field operations. The plaintiff's attorneys say Her boss admitted she would be tracked outside business hours and even knew how fast she was driving. So the question is, can an employer legally infringe on a worker's privacy? And again, for me, the employers may are going to argue, hey, we had a contract. She signed on. But nobody can, you can have a contract, but the enforceability on it, if it's making you giving up your civil right protections on your own free time. I mean, it's not like she was driving an armored car with protected goods where they were tracking where they were going on the job. This is somebody on her own free time. She was an admin assistant or something. What can they, would that have been a valid contract?
Well, if she doesn't have a contract of employment, she's an employee at will, she can be terminated. If she has a contract and she signs into that contract saying that she agrees to have this app, well, then she's agreed to have that app. And then it almost brings you back to Hillary Clinton. You get another phone. Maybe no one's telling her she has to carry that phone with her all the time. Get a phone for personal use.
She had the phone, but she chose to turn it off when it was at night or whatever else. The company argued, well, now you won't be responsive if a client's got a question or whatever else. But it wasn't just for being reached. They were tracking her whereabouts here, and apparently there's third parties, and even the people acknowledged that he did say those offhanded, moronic comments. I guess my point is, just because you say, you work here, you know, I want you basically to be able to be tracked at any time, in any place, and whatever else, you're now giving up your liberties to be able to travel and go where you want.
No, well, it doesn't mean that. And if what happens where people get themselves into trouble is they start to give explanations and they start to make outside comments, and those comments turn out to be discriminatory, or they violate another law. When you start to tell someone that they have to have this with them, and then you start to go into other reasons as to why you're terminating them, or you start to add other conditions, it doesn't make sense. Or
but
even
this personal tracking thing, Mayo, Susan was talking about Minority Report about the previous case, kind of got overtures here too, where basically you're being tracked to whereabouts, where you're going to be, what your habits are, how fast she was driving, they allegedly knew. I mean,
but that happens with your cell phone every day. Every app you have is tracking where you go, and it's sending.
But that's a voluntary contract that you make. That's not conditional employment.
So we're talking about a GPS. It would be illegal for the government to attach a GPS device to your car without your consent. Right. It would be a crime, a trespass for Mayo to attach a GPS device to my car without my knowledge and consent. She is put in a position where she has to consent to this 24/7 monitoring in order to keep her employment.
But Susan, can I ask you a question? Can't that consent carry legitimate limits with it? That a discretionary person can say, I understand, you want to know where I am for logistical purposes, but once it's 7 o'clock at night or whatever else, and I'm not on the clock anymore, I should be able to deactivate this app. Why is it legally that they're allowed to say, like, sure, you're an at-will employee, but you can't be fired for ageism. You can't be fired for sexism, for racism in this country. You're gonna have a lawsuit on your hands. So why isn't appropriate also, and I know she's got a lawsuit, that you can't violate somebody's civil rights just because you say if you want the job, you have to do it?
Well, I think it's going to come down to this. I mean, our employers can violate our privacy all the time. They can monitor our email and our internet usage. But the question is, did the employer have a legitimate reason for knowing and needing to know where she was and what she was doing when she was not working? This is a money transmitting company, so they needed to know where she was and where the money was when she was on company time.
Right. My question is off company time. Well, we're all in agreement until
it
the
would be
clock.
the same. Can a private company, it's
Yeah.
a private company. I don't know if it's a violation of your civil rights. Private company, you come to work for a private company, the company says, look, here's the deal. If you want to work here, these are the conditions. And if
Jimmy,
you
wait a
agree
second.
to those conditions.
But a company can't say to you, if you want to work here, you know what? I'm forbidding you to have a Star of David, or wear yarmulke if it's a high holy, whatever the case may be.
Well, there are certain protections. There are certain
So
protections.
why isn't a protection of privacy one of them?
Because you can surrender it. You can contractually surrender it. I want the job. I'm going to get paid this much, but these are the conditions, and I'm agreeing to those conditions. The issue that I have is when they come out and say it's for logistical reasons during the day when money is being transmitted, then I think they are exceeding the bounds of your consent.
You articulate it better than me. Yeah. We're going to hit a break here. When we come back to the wild world of sports, Patriots, obviously we all know what happened to Tom Brady and team here, but now they say they will not go quietly to the good night. They could sue the NFL right now over that suspension and other Deflategate penalties. Question is, do they have a case? And we'll also look at Jameis Winston's countersuit of his rape accuser and ask whether he's opening himself up potentially to big trouble by doing that. And also, the Yanks have said, terrific, we like you hitting home runs, but don't expect $6 million bonuses for it, A-Rod. You're no longer marketable. Who's going to win in this fight? We'll be right back after this.